no longer fun going to school or playing sports, all because of a sexual predator that was roaming the halls. And a 16-year-old was soon under police investigation for a sexual assault. He was charged with forcible sex abuse and taken out of school. It led to as many as 15 victims coming forward.
I didn't tell my parents, but they knew something was wrong when I couldn't get out of bed and was peeing blood. The pain was unbearable in my stomach. They took me to the hospital, and I was scared.
Parents of the victims claimed the sex abuse continued for several years, and the school covered up the allegations, allowing the 16-year-old to remain in school and prey on classmates. The 16-year-old admitted guilt to 8 of the charges and faced sentencing in Manti Juvenile Court. As a juvenile, his identity is also protected.
The hardest part has been the lack of apology and retaliation by calling me a snitch for telling the truth of what happened.
He feels bad. He specifically apologizes to those people that he has hurt.
After much debate, the judge sentenced the teen to probation.
Former Princeton School District employee Lamont Baldwin turning himself into police for sex crimes against children.
Mr. Baldwin, did you sexually assault these children?
He was sentenced to 5 years probation for gross sexual imposition. Victims and alleged victims were devastated by the ruling.
Assistant coach for the Canton High School boys hockey team is sentenced to 2 years probation after the 20-year-old met a 15-year-old girl on the dating app Tinder. The two had a sexual relationship. Locke's lawyer arguing his client believed the girl was 18.
3 former Michigan State football players are not going to prison in a sex assault case that rocked the campus and generated national headlines.
Do you think you did anything wrong?
No, Your Honor.
Why are we here?
It was King's alleged to have pulled a female co-ed into an MSU campus apartment bathroom, forcing her to have sex with him in January of 2017, and then allegedly passing her around to Corley and Vance, videotaping the scene in his phone. King, Corley, and Vance, now former MSU Spartan football players, pled guilty to seducing an unmarried woman. King had the added charge of surveillance of an unclothed person. Despite the exchange, the judge sentenced all 3 to 36 months to what's called Holmes Youthful Training Act probation, or HIDA probation. That means if they complete probation successfully, their records get erased.
Every action in the world has a reaction. This is the reaction to what you have done collectively. And you cannot undo it for the victim. She's going to live with this forever, and I'm hoping that she will heal.
An Oahu man convicted of sexually assaulting his 68-year-old mother has been sentenced to probation.
He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of indecent liberties with a child and was sentenced to 5 years probation. He met the 4-year-old and 10-year-old victims through his wife, Erica Malpass. She was a longtime babysitter for the victims and their family.
We're following some breaking news right now. The former NYPD officers accused of raping a suspect in their custody were officially sentenced on lesser charges today. Former officers Eddie Martins and Richard Hall were sentenced to 5 years probation today after pleading guilty to bribery and misconduct.
A mid-Michigan mother fighting to keep an accused child molester from striking again lost her battle in court today. Despite public outcry, Dean Stauffer will not have to register as a sex offender. He was sentenced today to 5 years probation and was also ordered to have no contact with the victim's family. Stauffer was initially charged with 2 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct and indecent exposure for allegedly molesting a 4-year-old relative. In exchange for pleading guilty to child abuse, prosecutors agreed to keep Stauffer off the registry. The victim's mother is not happy, saying the entire community has the right to know if a sex offender lives in their neighborhood.
Plea deal. The 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office gave a child molester.
Instead of going to prison, Hector Gonzalez was given probation. And as chief investigative reporter Eric Ross uncovered, police arrested Gonzalez in a previous case for assaulting more young girls.
A stunning development in court tonight as well. This former youth pastor, Brent Giroux, gets probation for sexually exploiting at least 2 boys. According to court documents, he told his victims he wanted them to gain, quote, sexual purity in the eyes of God. As you can imagine, that was the last thing the family and the prosecutors wanted to hear.
Been sentenced to 7 years probation for sexual assault of a child. Officials say 22-year-old Santos Ezekiel Martinez was sentenced in Taylor County's 104th District Court today. Martinez was arrested after an investigation in March 2019 in which he was accused of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old female in Taylor County.
With this case.
Tonight, the teacher who pleaded guilty to molesting preschool students just walked out of jail. This was part of a plea deal struck by attorneys for 27-year-old Jericho Hamilton. A Texas man who raped a 2-year-old has walked free thanks to a plea deal in the state of Texas. Now, the man here is Thomas Bowden, and apparently it all started when there was an altercation between him and his girlfriend, Brittany Lynn Rosser. Rosser claims that they were driving in a car, and he attempted to crash the car and kill both of them, and she managed to get out of that situation safely and call 911. Authorities were called to the scene, and as cops were questioning him, she noticed that there was something wrong with her 2-year-old daughter. So Rosser said that by the time officers showed up at her home, her daughter was screaming, "My butt, my butt." So according to a Facebook post that Rosser had posted, she said, "So I laid her down and opened her diaper to find an enormous amount of blood and a clear vaginal tear. I asked Annabelle what happened, and she said, Tom hurt me with his hand. I ran outside screaming and crying, pushed past several cops, and asked Thomas if he touches my daughter. He didn't say a word, but had a slight..." So, and also a 4-year-old who witnessed it. So the 4-year-old gave her all the information about what occurred. She told me that Tom held Annabelle down on the floor, holding a shirt over her face while she was screaming, and cut her private area with his hands. Later, I searched the house and found another diaper with tons of bloody wipes in the trash, along with empty beer cans. All was taken into evidence with Thomas's DNA all over it. He never even tried to hide the evidence. Now, the incredible thing is, he was charged with sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault of a child, and he accepted a plea deal of 10 years of probation and was ordered not to have contact with the victim as part of the deal. Oh, and also as part of the deal, Bowden will not be required to register as a sex offender. Now,
Call 6 investigates, just confirming there's a plea deal from an ex-IU music professor accused of sexually assaulting a student. Xiaoping Wang got 2 years probation for pleading guilty to criminal confinement. In return, a charge of sexual battery was tossed out. And a student says he sexually assaulted her after rehearsals for the Nutcracker at the IU Musical Arts Center back in November of 2015.
A Wichita Falls man pleads guilty before his jury trial was set to get underway today for the sexual assault of an 11-year-old girl in 2015.
37-year-old Damon Clyde Owens was placed on 10 years deferred probation today in 89th District Court with a $1,500.
probation for this former teacher, even though he sexually assaulted a student. Adding insult to injury, his attorney lashes out at the victim's parents.
Louis McKeon sentenced the former teacher at Ashland Park Robbins Elementary who invited a boy over to his house and sexually assaulted him. McKeon's attorney blames the student's parents.
That doesn't sit too well with the county attorney, nor does the sentence.
Sentence for sexually assaulting an 11-year-old boy. And I wish this never happened. I want to try to rebuild my life and start fresh. That's what I have to do. I want to be able to continue on with my life. His attorney, Bill Gallup, goes after the victim's family, saying they put their son in danger.
A man convicted of raping an 11-year-old girl and later forcing her to get an abortion will not face prison time. The Herald-Dispatch of Huntington, West Virginia reports Michael Joe Adkins of Ona was sentenced to 5 years probation and
Put up the picture of this pastor. That's the only screenshot we can get of him, okay? This pastor raped a little girl, okay? There's no dispute about that whatsoever. Alabama pastor who molested a girl that he later married has been placed on unsupervised probation. Jason Greathouse would have been charged with rape and facing 20 years in prison, but he married his victim to avoid all of that.
A former El Paso County Sheriff's deputy who created a pornographic image involving a young boy took a plea deal that allowed him to avoid prison time. Found fair, pleaded guilty to 1 count of sex assault on a child by a person in position of trust.
Local man sentenced to 10 years probation. He pleaded guilty to sex indecency with a child and meth charges. Court documents say police began investigating Derek Andrew Chapa after a child under the age of 10 came forward.